message is being broadcast by the Department of Defense of the Republic. At 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, multiple unidentified objects were confirmed to have entered Earth's atmosphere.
Discovery Houston, 20 seconds to LOS speed ready.
Contact, nice, be in orbit.
The first message that comes to you is you are a divine being. You matter. You count. You come from realms of unimaginable power and light, and you will return to those realms.
The vast stretches of the unknown and the unanswered and the unfinished still far outstrip our collective comprehension.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Broadcasting from Forest Tower Studios, all the way from the Deep South. Now, here is your host, Joe Root.
Broadcasting from atop a hill in the mossy creek bottoms of Cane Creek, Arkansas. This is Lighting the Void, and I'm your host, Joe Root. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It is Monday night, June the 24th, on into the 25th, and I apologize about my tardiness, but we're here, damn it, and we're ready to tell an interesting story. Tonight, Micael Wann is with us, and we're going to talk about the Susquehanna River mystery. And this is fascinating stuff that he recovered. Hidden mysteries of John Dee, the Rosicrucians, maybe some esoteric symbolism. I'm going to let him tell the story because it's deep, and I'm so interested in this stuff. I can't wait to get into it. And we're going to go right into it right after I do the quick show announcements and stuff. I want to thank everybody for coming on last week, as well as our new supporters. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate that. And our website is lightingthevoid.com. We're live on the Fringe FM. And this show is brought to you by Get the Tea at getthetea.com. Make sure you come to our webinar. The next one is July the 1st, Monday night, 5 p.m. Pacific, where Ronnie McMullen will be explaining all of these wonderful products to you and about your health, and he gives away stuff too. So it's Barbara came out. A couple of people came out last time, and I want to congratulate again Charlie for winning that. Also at ancientlifeoil.com, the best CBD oil on the planet. Preparewiththefriends.com and CannaSense. And we're going to get into this tonight. So I want you to really get your thinking caps on, because this is kind of like a mystery, an esoteric mystery, and it also digs into John Dee, what his past, all of that stuff. Hopefully you guys are familiar with John Dee. If you're not, then you're probably going to be a little bit behind, but that's all right. But John Dee was one of the oldest Renaissance magicians that started the Renaissance movement and esoteric, or the occultism and magic, and everybody knows about the Enochian angels. For my audience knows about this. But for reference, if you want to look something up tonight, go to SusquehannaAlchemy.com so you can actually pull up some of these images. And there's a great mystery, I feel, that he's uncovered, and we're going to get into that as well. Also, if you've had a UFO sighting that you want to report, and you're out in the southwest, western area, go to UFOseekers.com, check out their website. They're backed and supported by the Fringe FM, and give them a call at 661-UFO-7889. Tim Doyle, my brother over there. Go check out their YouTube channel too at youtube.com/UFO Seekers. Now, Micael Wann is with us, and again, the website is SusquehannaAlchemy.com. And I want to jump right into this because we're already late, and I can't wait to talk about this. Thank you so much for coming on the program, Micael. I really appreciate it.
Joe, it's my pleasure, and thank you for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation and see where we go.
Yeah, so I want to know first, before we get into all the stuff you uncovered and the symbolism, tell me how you first stumbled upon this at the Susquehanna River.
So let me take a step back, because this is a big story, and there are two ways which it can be looked at, or there's two ways which you really can appreciate what all of the implications are which are behind it. And one of it is like going in and looking at the details, and it's through the unbelievable amount of details across so many different areas that really support this unbelievable sort of tale, if you will. And so I call that like the Susquehanna mystery. But the Susquehanna mystery even fits into something bigger. So like the whole thing is ultimately like it points to at least what captures my attention is this underlying structure which we're experiencing, no different than like how the phi ratio shows up in infinite sort of places. And so with that being said, I'm not separate from this. It's I'm telling the story, that's for certain, but it is completely linked to my own personal story. And that's like the whole sort of like mystery sort of thing. It's like, it's real life as much as it is like, the history and all that other stuff. So it started for me maybe like 4 or 5 years ago. To be quite honest, 5 years ago. It was interestingly enough, I was going through a transition in my life. I'd moved out of the home which I had been living in for, I don't know, like 10 years. My wife and my wife at the time and I, we split up. And so I found myself kind of bouncing around for a little bit. And then I came back, and in fact, she found me a place which was near where our children attend school. And at first, I was like really kind of resistant, like to move to this town. I had this idea in my head. I'm like, this isn't for me, and I kind of begrudgingly went there because I was just kind of in this space where I was just kind of moving on the current of life, and that current brought me to this small town which is right on the Susquehanna River. And I move in there exactly the month which for those who know astrology, I moved the month my Uranus opposition went direct. Like, I mean, it's like synced up to that level. And I find myself in this like really interesting apartment in this 100-year-old building, which was like once a hotel and a brothel and like all sorts of like wild sort of like stuff going on. I mean, the place is haunted as can be. Right. And one of the first things I notice is the two rooms, which are the front rooms of the apartment. I'm looking at them, and it's an unusual shape. I mean, these 14-foot ceilings, and these rooms are like cubes, but I see their relationship with one another, and I'm like, I recognize this relationship. I make a lot of art, and I always use the phi ratio for my layout. So some division of it, and so whenever you work with something, specifically something is universal as the phi ratio, it gets in your nervous system. You can start spotting it. So sure enough, I go and I measure these two rooms with a measuring tape, and I'm like, they're in phi ratio. And like, this is like both like my language, the stuff which speaks to me, because I work with it. And then I also know it's universal. So I'm like, all right, I don't know where I am, but I know I'm somewhere. I know like, there's too much just kind of lining up. So that being said, like back to like real life, I'm going through like a tough time. And if you've ever had the misfortune of having to go through a divorce and children and stuff like that, I mean, it's horrible. And so yeah. I was in a real tough space, and it was springtime. It was April when I moved in, and there's this, as I said, the town, the small little town, which is right on the river. It's a river town. And just recently, like maybe the fall before I moved in there, a bike trail, the most beautiful bike trail you can imagine, was like built through this wooded area which runs along the river. And the reason I say it's beautiful because there's a river and it's curvy and it's like trees and it's like it's easy to get to, but you feel like all this sort of stuff. And I'm like riding and I'm working through all of like the inner sort of turmoil that comes through when one part of life dies and you're waiting for the next thing to birth. Right. And I'm just naturally curious by nature, and I've studied like the strangest of stuff. Like it was my full-time job for like 15 years. And so I've got that background, and I'm going through all this stuff, and I'm like looking out at this river which is right by where I live. And I'm like, I don't know anything about this. I'm a curious guy. So I go home and and I go to Wikipedia. I found Wikipedia is the best esoteric research tool you can imagine. And it sounds ridiculous because of just the nature of Wikipedia, but it is the ground zero for like what is supposed to be out there. And you define supposed to be any way you want, but you can link up with everything very quickly. So I go to Wikipedia and I start with, what's this river? What's the Susquehanna River? And I'm reading it, and I have enough of a background in terms of knowing what to look for. And things are just like popping off like you couldn't believe. And the first thing that really caught my eye was that the river is tied to a historical document which is called the John Smith Map of Virginia.
Okay.
And the John Smith Map of Virginia is
so we need to start with that. The John Smith. Just keep that in mind.
That's where it begins.
Okay.
That is the entrance point into it.
All right.
So let's get a little bit of context for the John Smith map. So what are we talking about? So this is a map which was published in 1612. It's called the John Smith map because it's accredited to John Smith, the leader of Jamestown, the colony, the English colony that eventually became the model for all of the 13 colonies, which then became the United States. And it's also the first permanent colony of the British Empire. Jamestown is said to be the birthplace of both the British Empire and the American Empire. And, there's reason to suggest that they're one of the same and still are. But this Jamestown is significant. And so this map is tied to it. I also know there's a significance in firsts. I mean, whether you want to look at this esoterically or just like as a parent, like, your child's first step, but you don't know its 33rd. And so the first is always significant. So I know this map is tied to it. And I know that this is the beginning of the largest empire since recorded history. And I'm not saying like empires are good things. I'm just saying a lot of people wanted to do it, and these guys did it better than anyone else. So I'm like, all right, I know that this is unique and special, like in terms of the context of our history. And then, so I'm looking at the map, and the map's fascinating. It's a map of modern day Virginia, Maryland, New York, and the primary focus of it is the Chesapeake Bay. And there are some drawings on it, and it's like so many ways it's fascinating. It was used for like 80 years as the primary map for that region of the Mid-Atlantic states. And so I'm looking at it, and just on probably johnsmith.net, you could blow up the map. And I noticed that on the very top where they have the latitudinal markers, it was like 37, 38, 39, 40, and 41, that the 40 is mirrored. And so it's not just backwards, it's not just 0, 4, but the 4 is pointing the wrong way. And so I'm like, oh, well, that's odd. So I quickly go and I search. I'm like, why is the John Smith map 40 backwards? And there's nothing. I'm like, there are millions of references on the John Smith map. It's this significant historical document, and there's this glaringly, like, it's not hidden. Like, you just go and look at it and be like, yep, there's verse 40. And I'm like, how come nothing's ever been written about this? They write about everything, those people.
They probably put that there on purpose, though, so somebody would pay attention.
Yes, they do.
Yes,
they did. I would agree with that completely. So when you scratch a little bit beneath the surface, you're like, all right, well, Jamestown, like, how does that happen, right? I remember this a little bit, I suppose, from seventh grade history, and maybe I've seen the Pocahontas film. It's the same John Smith, but I'm like, I don't really understand. Like, I don't have a story in my mind of like, how did that happen? And so you do a little research and see that there was a company There was a for-profit company behind Jamestown. It's called the Virginia Company of London, and they were a bunch of not quite the aristocratic class of England, but it was a very wealthy merchant class, and they got the rights to go and colonize the New World, and they got that directly from King James, and they had a board of directors, an executive council, and there's on that council, there are a bunch of people who were on it. There was Francis Bacon. And Francis Bacon was, arguably the most significant person behind it. And the reason I say that is because he wrote their charters and he presented on their behalf to Parliament. So they're like, okay, well, who's Francis Bacon? And that's a whole show in itself. But I'll switch gears to Manly P. Hall's The Secret Teaching of All Ages. You know what book I'm referring to?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, yeah, everyone knows that book, right? So you go and you look at that book. Like, I don't know anyone who's actually read it, but we all have it, or at least, we got it on our bookshelves, and you thumb through it, but to read it cover to cover, at least I never have.
It's usually where everybody starts with Western esoteric occultism and stuff like that. That's the book everybody starts with.
It's bookshelf. It's the foundation of the bookshelf, but it's not exactly cover to cover reading, but it suddenly became a great resource. And the reason it became a great resource, if you look at the extensive index in the back of that book, you're going to see about 65 different places for Francis Bacon. And so I think the full title of the Secret Teachings of All Ages is an encyclopedia of Kabbalistic, Freemasonic, and Rosicrucian philosophy.
Yep, you got it.
And so when we go, you can learn a lot about the nature of what a book is about by looking at its index. You can look at whatever the summary is, but basically whatever's going to have the most amount of index listings is pretty much like what the book's about. That's just a quick way of scanning any book with an index. And so the point of the Francis Bacon having all of those different mentions within the book is because he's that significant. And there's a quote in the book which I like a lot, and this was written, I think, like 1928. And it was like, the Baconian mystery is becoming daily more apparent. And I'm like, what Baconian mystery? Why am I the last one to find out about this?
So at the time, did you know anything about Francis Bacon or the Rosicrucians or anything?
I mean, I was familiar, probably not Francis Bacon. Like, he was probably I knew him like John Smith, like he was in my mental Rolodex, but not really that clear upon it. And then same thing with Rosicrucianism. I'm familiar from my own research and my own work of the work of Rosicrucianism, but I never really got that into it. I wasn't that familiar with it, but I had enough of a background to know that it's something. Like, I had enough. So when I looked at the map and I saw the connection with Francis Bacon to the company behind Jamestown and the John Smith map, and then you do a little bit of reading of the dates of when everything happened. Like, John Smith Jamestown was founded in 1607. John Smith returns 1609. The map is produced in 1612. It comes out of England. And so obviously when John Smith is going to go back, and he was the executive in charge of the satellite office of the Virginia Company of London, Jamestown settlement, of course he's meeting with the board of directors, not even being conspiratorial. Here's a conspiracy for me, or for what I think is I don't even think John Smith existed. I think it's a legal holding name for I don't know who. But that's where the conspiracy is in my mind. The fact that he and Bacon were in contact, that's just common sense. Mm-hmm. So then we go and we look at Bacon. His influence was so his fingerprints are all over the beginnings of everything of our modern world. He's the father of the scientific method. He was the final editor of the King James Bible. He was the driving force behind the colonization scheme of the New World. He had a huge influence in the legal world. There was quite a considerable amount of literature written in the early 1900s. He was the true author of the Shakespearean works. I mean, everything kind of touches this Bacon guy. And he was the Lord Chancellor. I believe was his title, the right-hand man of King James. Like, I mean, this guy has all of this type of influence. Everything comes through him. This is part of what Manly P. Hall was talking about with like the Baconian mystery. And Hall puts forth, he's like, Bacon is more of like a figure, like, you know, everything is accredited to him for another reason. But I don't know. I mean, there are people who follow Bacon and treat him as an ascended master, someone who understands the workings of material reality, where he's able to, do things. If you have those sort of access codes, buy, locate, live forever, all of that stuff, you're living at a layer, you're living one layer deeper on the stack, if you will. So I don't know who Bacon is, but he's tied to this. And the majority of his work, particularly his public work, he was known to practice something which was known as steganography, which is hiding secret information in public documents. And also he's known for like straight up ciphers, like codes, like, where you're not even trying to hide the fact that it's a code, it's a code. Like
which by the way is something a lot of Masons and Rosicrucians did. They hid that stuff everywhere. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I'm not suggesting anything which is far-fetched. Like, this is how it's done. Like, just look around, this is it. Everything is encoded. And so, long and short of it, using the secret teachings of all ages as a guidebook. I've had it for years. I've never actually read it, or maybe I've read some things. I've looked at the pictures, but I've never had like a purpose for it. And suddenly I have a purpose. So I'm reading everything I can read in that book about Bacon, about different techniques of steganography, which the Rosicrucians and and in the Freemasonic tradition. And I'm like, okay, I'm getting kind of wired for it, because they don't tell you this is how it works. They're just telling you what's been exposed, but they're also saying like, oh yeah, there's a ton of stuff which no one's ever even looked at. I'm like, well, I think I'm looking at something right now.
But you're starting to realize, though, right now, I'm thinking that when you're a seeker of knowledge, that you actually, they've left all these codes and stuff for you to find. Like, that's completely what you're starting to realize, right?
So I'm going to go 100%. So me, I'm not a member of any secret clubs.
Sure.
And so this was written for someone who does not have access there. So I'll take a step back. I decipher the map, let's say, but I treat it like a hypothesis, because I'm like, yeah, maybe you're misinterpreting it. And what I'm suggesting, and I'd also suggest there's probably a whole bunch of other stuff in there, but the main purpose, or at least the main purpose of what I've seen so far, is that within the map is a secret location. It's a location that gives you a cross point. And that makes sense. Like, it's all of this stuff is very, very logical. It's meant for someone who is, someone who likes riddles. And it's right. It's meant to be decoded, and it's meant to be decoded in a simple enough way that anyone who can access anything that's in the public realm of information, you should be able to crack this. So I completely think that this was put for someone who is not necessarily in the know to find it. Gotcha. And so the secret code, so the secret location, let's say, is the Susquehanna River at the 40th parallel. And so I'm like, all right.
Which, just to be clear, your trigger was noticing that the the 40 was backwards, or the 4 and the 0 was backwards.
Exactly.
Okay.
So you see a drawing of a Susquehanna warrior in the upper right-hand corner. And again, another whole show just on the depth. There's so much being passed on in that message. But the Susquehanna warrior is first, it's dressed in Freemasonic regalia, but in a crypto, in a hidden way. Like it's got a collar, it's got a jewel, it's got a but it's not exactly shown in like what you're going to think it's going to be, but you can tell by looking at him, like, yeah, that's exactly what it is. And the warrior is wearing an apron with a fold over, a fringed apron, and in the certain the facial expression, and then also the posture, it's identical to a very famous painting called George Washington Lays the Cornerstone of the Capitol. And it's a painting of George Washington in Freemasonic regalia laying the cornerstone of the Capitol. And like they're spitting images. And so, and underneath the feet of it is this really interesting statement which says, the Susquehannocks are a giant-like people and thus attired. And, that has probably a few different pieces of information encoded in it, but I was just satisfied with the fact that, giant-like, that right away just is red flags are going off. Like giant-like can mean a lot of different things than attired, which is another kind of one clue to look at the attire of the warrior, which is in Freemasonic regalia, but then also like it's a double entendre, like that's where the Hiram Abiff tale takes place, in Tyre. That's the beginning that's the location of Solomon's temple.
Right.
And so like there's all of this stuff being in there. And to me, what that's saying, or what's most significant, is like, okay, this is where you want to look. Oh, you knew from the 40 was objective. It's objectively mirrored. And now like interpretation of the character, well, yeah, that's a little bit subjective. So, you got to be like flexible with it. So within the secret teachings of all ages, it talks a lot about Baconian ciphers, and the quote which I'm thinking of, it says, often in a pictocipher, like a picture crypt, the character of the picture will hold in their hand some sort of device pointing to the key to decipher the code. And so the example which they use in the book is very different than the example, or what I'm going to go and say is happening in this map. But it's the same idea. We have to be flexible, because this is how you play the game, flexibility. And so in the warrior's hand is a bow. And just by looking at how it's drawn, like the bow is the centerpiece of the drawing, because the body is built around the bowstring. You can just see that by how it touches the hip and how it bisects the arm. And that bow is resting at the exact location, or at the source location of the Susquehanna River. And so the Susquehanna River and the Chesapeake Bay are the same body of water. The Susquehanna River transitions into an estuary. An estuary is a blending of ocean or saltwater and freshwater. And whenever the Atlantic was said to rise, it's said 12,500 years ago, that pushed up ocean water, the lower valley of this river, which has been flowing for 250 million years, and it flooded the valley. But the Chesapeake Bay and the Susquehanna River, and the point I'm trying to make here is it's the same entity. It's the same unit. It's like your legs are part of your body. It's just a different form of it. And so the warrior's pointing at the Susquehanna River source. And so I'm going to suggest, for the hypothesis, that the river, or that the warrior, represents the Susquehanna River. It's a double entendre. This is one of the main techniques of steganography, is you show something which has multiple meanings, so that the person not looking for a clue or a code, they're going to be like, oh, look, that's a duck. Of course it's a duck. But someone who's like, oh, I'm looking for a code, but that duck also represents this. That's the double entendre. And that's what Bacon did with a lot of his change of the English language, double entendre. He made it poetic. So that being said, the reversed 40 and the Susquehanna warrior in Masonic attire represent a cross section, which is the Susquehanna River and the 40th parallel.
Gotcha. So that's your starting point right there, right?
And that's just a starting point. We've been talking for what, like 30 minutes? Like, I mean, that's how, like, but in order to really grasp like the depths and you know, this is the detail which it requires, and the visuals, you need to see it. You need to see the map. You need to see the satellite images of the river. You need to see this stuff, and it becomes real. That's why I sent you those visuals beforehand, because it goes from just being a story some guy's talking about. You're like, okay, I'm starting to see this. So I'm going to cut to the end point, and then we could go back to some of the middle stuff. But so what's the next thing you're going to do? You're like, all right, well, 40th parallel and Susquehanna River. Let me go see where that is. Let me go see if there's anything interesting. And that's, you know,
so
one of the beauty.
Did you go out there physically to that location?
Well, I'm doing this all in real time on my computer in my living room. So I'm just looking at Google Earth.
Gotcha.
But here's the kicker. Now, here's the kicker. So I told you, I just randomly found, like, I mean, I was living in the area. I was living in Lancaster County, and now I live in a different town in Lancaster County on the far end. And so it's not like I moved halfway around the world. It's not like I'm suggesting that. But I did find myself pulled in this direction. I had no idea about this river, and I certainly had no idea that I was located at 40 degrees, 0 minutes, and 13 seconds. So the location was exactly where I was living.
That's pretty rad. I got you.
So I go and I start looking at at Google Earth, and I'm looking just around. Like 40 degrees can mean a lot of different things. There's 70 miles between like the 40th degree and the 41st, and the 40th degree and the 39th degree. And so they didn't really have GPS back then. They could tell, they could identify the latitude from stars and different pieces of equipment. Like that was able to be done, but I'm not certain, like, you know, how sharp it was. Like, are you going to 40 degrees exactly? Or are you going like in this general area? And then plus, like, you know, how general are we going to be? So I'm totally open. Like, I don't know what I'm looking for. But I'm going to go start at the most obvious place, 40 degrees, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. And I go to look in the river, and if you probably about a half a mile on the western bank of the river, inland, you can see this phi spiral. If you know what a phi spiral looks like, an expanding spiral. I'm like, what's that? And zoom in, and I zoom in. And I see, and we're looking at this from a bird's eye view. And then I see that it's a crescent moon. It's in the shape of a crescent moon and a sun. And so if you know anything about, you know, esoteric symbology and alchemy and stuff like that, you know, the crescent moon and the sun juxtaposed next to one another is ancient symbol that goes a really, really long way back. Oh, yeah. And it's associated with the exact same sort of folks. So I'm like, all right, you know, this seems to be a confirmation, you know, that this looks like that. And I go and I do a little bit more research about this area. And so a couple interesting things happen. It's a park, it's a public park, and it came about in existence because it was actually going to be turned into high-end custom homes, and the real estate developer uncovered human remains when they began the construction. And this is known Native American land. So anytime you find human remains like this in Native American known land, like it's taken over by eminent domain. You know, you can't build on it. This is not this. So the real estate developer had the property purchased from him from the county which it was in, and it became like this whole big sort of story. Like this isn't like anything kind of secret. But the thing which was interesting is it was an actual burial ground of the Susquehannocks, because that's where they lived. Like literally right here. This is the history book, the Susquehanna area. So now we've got that connection. And then I did a little bit of research. I'm like, all right, well, when did this park open up? And so the park opens up on May 12th, 2007. And it was kind of a soft opening because it became a little bit of a local controversy, just in terms of like how the land or the county, there was a disappointment from the real estate developer. He didn't think he got his fair value for the land, and it was eminent domain, and it was like all this big deal. And then there was talk of building this very, very large center to Native American life, and that didn't happen. And then eventually what happened was it just turned into this like really, really special, like there's a gravity to it. You feel it, but it's just a scenic vista. It's a view. You climb up to the top of the hill, and it's got 12 different granite boulders that go around the circle. And then from above, you can see the circle is a crescent moon and a sun. And so it opened up, this very quiet opening, and that was May 12th. But at the same time, on the exact same weekend, on May 12th through 14th at Jamestown. So Jamestown is on the same body of water because Jamestown is on a tributary to the Chesapeake Bay, and the Chesapeake Bay is the Susquehanna River. So it's the same body of water. And Jamestown was celebrating their anniversary weekend because it was May 12th, 1607, that Jamestown, which is where we get this location from the John Smith map, was established. It was founded. This marked the beginning of the British Empire and then what would become the United States of America.
Man, this is so trippy, man. You know what I feel like real quick, just before you, I'm so jealous. Who in their life doesn't want to have this kind of adventure? Like now you're on a mystery, right? You're on a cross between an Indiana Jones and what Tom Hanks was in when he was in that Demons and Angels kind of movie. So you're in that type of mystery in your life right now, and nobody's talking about this but you, right? I mean,
I would yes to all of those points you just made.
Yeah, fascinating.
And so, just one more piece on this. So we have this. So two more pieces I want to say. So we've got this amazing, synchronicity, coincidence, plan, however you want to call it, because I'm pretty certain that the whole like real estate developer thing was not a ruse. I don't believe that was a story planted in the papers so that the secret, that this thing could happen. I mean, it's possible, but I would say probability wise, just knowing how things work, I'd be like, no, I don't think that happened. I think something else made that happen. And that's like, we're dealing with the underlying structure of reality. And we're going back to like the Rosicrucian stuff, like working at that level of reality. So this park opens up exactly on 400 years to the day. At the same time, there's a celebration happening at Jamestown. This wasn't just like, a normal celebration where they're like shooting off fireworks. This was a big enough celebration that Queen Elizabeth II was in attendance. And remember, the entire British Empire began under the watch of Queen Elizabeth I. And so it's going to be significant that Queen Elizabeth II was at the conclusion, and I'll explain that in a moment, but she was there, the Bushes were there, all sorts of other like dignitaries. That doesn't just happen. It occurred because this was a significant event. And so there's this big party happening down at Jamestown. At the same time, there's this like quiet little opening happening up at the secret location encoded in the Jamestown map. So now we want to zero into 400. So within a lot of the Western mysteries tradition, it is built upon the foundation of the Kabbalah. And the most basic sort of thing are like, within that sort of mystical Judaism, we have gematria, the most basic code where letters have numerical values.
Yeah, I'm ahead of you in my mind already, and we're talking perfection here.
All right, exactly. So the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet is Tav.
Right.
And what's it got a value of? 400.
Yeah.
400 from a Kabbalistic, Rosicrucian, Freemasonic perspective means completion. 400 breaths, 400 days, but now we're talking about 400 solar rotations. Queen Elizabeth I began it. Queen Elizabeth II oversaw the conclusion. We can ask the completion of what? That's, the next layer of the mystery, but we can see like this is kind of like the foundation of like, okay, this is the level I'm working at. Like this is the level of this mystery.
So, okay, let me just pause right here.
Okay.
Once you get into that, at this point, there's something 100% to this. Your life is kind of put on hold. At least mine would be. My life would be put on hold because if I get into stuff like this, I'll disappear, man. Like I'll start trying to figure this stuff out big time. And I'm just wanting to tell you, I've been studying Rosicrucian and Masonry and the ciphers, all the stuff my whole life. And I've always wanted to stumble upon something like this. So I'm extremely jealous of you right now, man. I really am. You were wise enough to figure it out. Anyways, I'll stop saying stuff like that. I just had to tell you that.
Well, I'll go back to the original point. This has to do with you could look down, you can look up, and it all connects. And this, from my experience being in my skin, like this lined up perfectly as well. It's like my life more or less prior to moving into this apartment more or less disintegrated, the year or two before that, I started transitioning away from what I used to do. I actually used to write market feasibility studies for real estate developers.
So you got an analytical mind, basically. That's one thing that's going for you.
I've got an analytical mind, but I left that because I started doing art full time. And here's the thing where it gets even more interesting is probably the last job which I was getting a paycheck, like a regular paycheck. I took this project for the township, for Lancaster Township, and it was more or less I mapped out the sewer system, the stormwater system. So when you have grates in front of a house or a building and a road, like that goes somewhere, and that eventually all empties out into tributaries, and they would go into the Susquehanna River. And this information was required from the EPA level that any municipality that was dumping rainwater into a tributary, which would eventually go into the Chesapeake Bay, that needs to be mapped, or that needed to be known. And so I had this job where I basically went around and looked at every single grate in this township, in Lancaster Township, which is a very historical township, which ties to all of these guys as well. And for 9 months, I'm creating a map and a database and figuring out how they're related, because no one knew anything, and connecting these different sewers with an address and shining flashlights and mirrors down to see where it's connected, and walking around and looking for other sewers to figure out this puzzle. But what I'm going to suggest to you, or at least this is the way how I see it, or the way how I look at reality, is I was getting attuned to something.
Yeah.
And so all of the different, and I don't think I'm unique this way. I don't think I'm unique at all. I believe that all of us, every moment of our lives is bringing us to the next moment. And my life had been bringing me and preparing me for the moment when, all this stuff would kind of be discovered, I suppose. I'm not saying this is destiny. I'm just saying this is what my life happened.
Well, let me just make a point to you. I've been telling my audience for years, we've been talking about occultism and stuff for a long time. And what I've been trying to tell them is, it's one thing to read the books, but when you become an occultist for real, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to practice magic or anything. An occultist just looks for hidden things, right? And that's what Manly P. Hall says in his book, to look through, it wasn't the Secret Teachings of All Ages. It was another manuscript that he wrote. And he said that to look through the hidden symbolism of things, for an occultist, this is doubly true. In other words, once you find something hidden, you need to keep looking because there's something else there. Mainly P. Hall stated it clearly.
Yeah, I agree completely. I liked how you described it. Like, I tend to agree. That's what a real occultist is. It's someone who doesn't just look for the hidden, but recognize that they're living in the hidden, and the hidden is worthy of attention, because when you pay attention to the hidden, that is when you're able to see the big picture. And what's the big picture? Whatever it is, what we're living in.
Right.
We don't know. That's the mystery. What the hell is this? That's what really drives me, is understanding a deeper understanding of the mechanisms, the hidden mechanisms, for living life in this body.
Yeah, of everything, pretty much, right? Yeah.
Right. In order to apply it. Because we're going through, if you go look at real life, we're in a time of change. That's undeniable. The truth is the proof is in the pudding. And so I think it's a skill, what I'm talking about. And these skills are becoming, as everything is changing in our outer world, we know that everything is changing in our inner world, and that's on every level. And that's why, the stuff which I'm doing, stuff which other people doing, all of this hidden stuff is coming out, because that's what occurs during the transitions, whether they're manufactured or, regardless of what level they're manufactured at.
So you found a glitch in the matrix with the 40 being mirrored. You found this location here. You found the map of John Smith that had the bow pointing straight to this spot. Right? You found the symbolism of the sun and the moon. Where else did this take you?
So there's one more piece to that.
Okay.
And then I'll ask you a question where you want me to go, because we could go really deep in a couple different directions. But so we have in the center point of this, it's called High Point Scenic Vista. That's this park with the sun and the moon. If you could imagine if you had a map, just a regular map, a modern map, and you laid out on your table of this location of this is of Lancaster County and York County, Pennsylvania, and you opened up a compass, a compass with a pencil on one side and a point on the other side, and you put that point out. You put that point right in the center of High Point, right where we're talking about, where all the action is, and you extend the pencil out to Franklin and Marshall College. It's located 10 miles away. And then you draw a circle. So are you kind of following that visual with what I just described?
Yeah, gotcha.
Okay. So then you'll go and you'll have a circle with the center being a High Point, and it's as far out as Franklin and Marshall College. That's 10 miles, exactly 10 nautical miles. So then you take your pencil and you put it where the Franklin and Marshall College is. And you have a straight edge, and you put your straight edge on that pencil point, and then you move the straight edge so it lines up with the center, or where High Point is. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to draw a line from Franklin and Marshall through High Point, and we're going to draw it to the other end of the circle. So we got a line. We split it in half. We know it went right in half because we're right in the middle. Mm-hmm. And when you get to the other side of the circle, there's another college there, and that's called York College. And both York College, which began as York Academy, and Franklin and Marshall College were founded in 1787. And they're both associated with members of the American Philosophical Society, which was one of Ben Franklin's societies, and it is the American version of the Royal Society, which the Royal Society was the manifestation of Francis Bacon's concept of the invisible college. What the invisible college is, there's probably multiple levels, but on the most basic level, that's kind of how we see things. So we see all right, we've got these two colleges which are completely balanced by High Point. And now we're going to go and we're going to get the 90 degree, we're going to get the 90 degree to that diameter, that line we just drew across. So we're going to make a T-square coming out. And so we're going to do the T-square coming off the top. And then that hits a third college called Elizabethtown College. And it's also the location of the Masonic villages, which is like the official retirement home, I think, associated with the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania. Again, I'm not a Freemason, so I might get like some of my language,
that's cool,
my syntax wrong. But there is this perfect T-square alignment surrounding this of colleges, all associated either completely directly or metaphorically or synchronistically around this same location, and they've been built hundreds of years in advance.
Yeah, and if they have to do with philosophy, anything like that, and you look into the history of it, you can almost guarantee that at the very least a Mason was a part of putting it there, more than likely. And then I'm sure you found out about all that, though. You already mentioned Ben Franklin.
Oh, exactly. You got Ben Franklin, BF, and Francis Bacon, FB. They both fit the same modus operandi. Like Ben Franklin did everything. He discovered electricity. He's like, it's like he's another one of these characters. I don't know if they're real. I don't know. I don't know anything. All I know is what I read in the books that both of these people, they fit a common mode. They're expressed to us in the exact same way. We're told that they did the same sort of stuff, like incredibly significant in terms of shaping where we are today. So to me, that was the final, like, there is something really, there's something significant going on. And so there are two directions which we could go right now. We can kind of talk a little bit more about the bigger picture of what is this 400-year completion, what is going on here, or we could talk more of like the history stuff and all the details as it relates to this specific area, because it gets deep there and it's really kind of fun and interesting with like petroglyphs and the first Rosicrucian permanent facility in the New World. Like all of that lines up to this area.
I'll tell you what we're going to do. Since I've already skipped a break, and I'll probably end up skipping another one, I'm going to take a break right here. I got to, and then I'll let the audience decide. Do you guys want to look into the number 400 and perfection, or do you want to look more into this location and like the monuments and what all that stuff means? Because honestly, like if you really told everything you know about the story, how long do you think it would take? All day? 12 hours, probably?
All week. All week. Well, I mean, we could go so many, but I just want to be clear. The 400, we're not talking about the symbolic of 400. Sure. We're talking about what the 400 is, what is happening on the river, because there's something happening, and it's a magical operation. So I'll leave that as the teaser as we take our break.
All right. So you guys put what you want to figure out, which one, in the chat, or text in at 501-777-5631. We'll be right back. With Micael Wann. Fascinating stuff. Don't go anywhere.
This is Corbin, son of the one and only Joe Roop, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
Hola, Fringe listeners. This is Dave Cruz of Beyond the Strange, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
So, have you heard of heavy metals? I'm not talking about the heavy metals in the junkyard. I'm talking about the heavy metals that build up in your body. Heavy metals in your body can make you feel sluggish, fatigued, and just plain off. Why not try Life Change Tea at getthetea.com? Cleansing your body and making you feel great. No, not cleansing the outside of your body, but cleansing the inside of your body of intruders that sneak their way into you and set up an intruder camp. Life Change Tea helps remove unwanted intruder camps. Brew it, Steep it and drink in the results. Tastes great, so you can create a new health habit. Our tea loves to help people. It just needs the chance. So order yours today by logging on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Our Life Change Super Strength Tea is waiting. This could be a beautiful relationship. Take charge of your health. Order at getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com.
Who were the real ancient Egyptians? What is it about ancient Egypt that captivates us all? The critically acclaimed series Magical Egypt is back with all new episodes. Let Chance Gardner and company take you on another adventure through Magical Egypt in the new series Magical Egypt 2. Magical Egypt 2 attempts a forensic reconstruction of the science of the ancients through a study of ancient aesthetics. Also, the best researchers and authors in the field like John Anthony West, Graham Hancock, Laird Scranton, Robert Duval, Lon Duquette, Aaron Cheek, and more join together to explore the topics of the esoteric and the hidden messages of the ancient Egyptians. Just go to magicalegypt.com right now and put in the code word FRINGE and get 10% off any download or order, including the groundbreaking original Magical Egypt series, as well as the new episodes in Magical Egypt 2. Also, check out the great work and the companion series at magicalegypt.com. Click the banner on the Fringe FM or go to magicalegypt.com and use the code word FRINGE and get 10% off your order today while it lasts.
Alex X. Hi, I'm Alex Exum, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
We've heard your feedback loud and clear. You called it out, and now we're answering. All new live programming, 5 nights a week. Always remember, The Fringe FM is for you, the listener, and we appreciate your feedback. Keep the feedback coming. You can email us at talkback@thefringe.fm, call the station at 501-777-5631, or send us a message on Facebook at The Fringe FM.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
All right, everyone, this is Justin from the UK. Excuse the chitty. If you're into the Fringe and you want to hear the brass tacks, my old china plate, Joe Roop and his guests on Lighting the Void will open your mince pies. You need to shut your north and south and use your 10-speed gears and listen to them bubble. You could hear a Barry Crocker, no Brussels, but he ain't no holy friar. Anyway, you be the Barnaby Rudge and take a butcher's.
I'm Ryan Gable, and I want to remind you to keep your radio, phone, tablet, or computer tuned to the Fringe FM, and visit the website thefringe.fm to listen to the entire lineup of shows. You can also catch my broadcast, The Secret Teachings, Monday through Friday, beginning at 12 a.m. midnight U.S. Pacific Time, right here on the Fringe FM.
Howdy, this is Catalina, and you're listening to Lighting the Void with Joe Roop.
All right, welcome back to Lighting the Void. I'm your host, Joe Roop. We're live on the Fringe FM. Tonight we're here with Micael Wann, and we're talking about a fantastic mystery. So, like, if you're into the esoteric, the occult, symbolism, I'd even say Indiana Jones, angels, demons, that whole type of thing, you know, decoding, stuff like that. That's what we're talking about tonight, and specifically about the Susquehanna River, which he stumbled upon this great mystery. And you can check out the website for reference with a ton of images at susquehannaalchemy.com. I've dropped the links in both chat rooms, one at the Fringe FM and the other one over at Spreaker. And so I did a vote, and I'm still looking here, and it looks like, yeah. So I've got like, it's like 6-3. People want to know more about the magical operation of the river. A few wanted to know about the monuments, but I think
that's the bright way to go.
Okay.
I was thinking about that during the break. That's definitely the direction where I think it's that's the better path. We're going to get more bang for our buck there.
All right.
All right. So where to begin on this. So we want to begin with, we're going to talk a little bit, we're going to go back in time, we're going to have some context to understand what's going on. So the first thing is just an awareness that there is an ancient practice which seemed to occur in different types of forms across a variety of cultures all across Earth, and that was river worship, river goddess worship, some type of water worship. The two best examples would be like Vedic India and the holy rivers of India, but then also within the Celtic culture, which was, in the British Isles, but then also on the mainland of Europe. And, there's evidence to suggest they have the same mother culture to begin with. But regardless, like those are two examples of where we see river worship, and it was done in many other different forms. And the point I'm trying to make is there seems to have been an understanding, almost a universal knowing of a river or water having some greater degree of significance than what I think modern humans think of when they think of water. And you talk to someone and you would suggest about how the ancient cultures would worship rivers, and it would usually be like, justified from our intellectualizing of like, oh, well, the river did this and it gave them water, and all of that's true, all the material stuff. But I'm going to suggest, and I can't, prove this, but this is just, my thought. They knew something we didn't. So let's just hold that as an idea. So now we're going to switch over to John Dee, and we're going to talk a little bit about Enochian magic. Well, first, like John Dee. So he was Queen Elizabeth's advisor. He was her astrologer. He was considered the most learned man in all of Europe. And he was a very, very kind of like techno mind. Like his mind was very, very like rationally based. And he approached the esoteric and sciences, they were one and the same. And he approached it like a tactician. And he was also Queen Elizabeth's spy, and he would go and he would travel to different monarchs, and I'm assuming maybe for state business or maybe for tutoring, I don't know. But he would write letters back to Queen Elizabeth, and he would sign 007, and that's like where Ian Fleming does his nod, nod, wink, wink on John Dee. But John Dee is also probably within esoteric circles, he's best known as the person who introduced to the world what is now known as Enochian magic.
Right.
And so Enochian magic is, and we know this based upon the diaries which John Dee kept. Enochian magic was promised to him to give him any practitioner of the system which was being taught to command tutelatory spirits, so earth spirits.
Mm-hmm.
And John Dee was interested in this because he was the visionary and coined the phrase British Empire. And he was very, very intrigued by this idea and driven by this idea of the British Empire. And at the time, Britain was just this kind of like small, impoverished nation, well behind Portugal and Spain in terms of the age of discovery and wealth and riches and all that sort of stuff. And so he was very interested in using this system in order to advance his vision of the British Empire. And so the tutelatory spirit and how it would work and how they used to do warfare back then, and it's kind of, you can make an argument that it's still done this way as well because there's so much occultic symbology within all militaries. But there would be battles happening in physical reality on the battlefield, but then there'd be magicians who are battling out in the invisible realms. And the strategy is to go after the tutelatory spirit or the protecting spirit of the land of your enemy, let's say. And so that's why Dee was interested. He's like, what? I can go and control the tutelatory spirits of my enemies, and I can go and win my battles? He's like, yeah, definitely. I'm all over this stuff. Now, according to the diaries, Dee never actually practiced the system, but again, we're working with murky sort of stuff. So regardless, it's my opinion that like just the interaction, some stuff was happening. And how it said was they were going to be given the world which Dee lived in was protected from chaotic forces, chaotic demons by these different watchtowers, and he would be able to more or less like open up a window and let them in, but because he's protected in his circles, he's able to then go and command these forces. So I'm going to suggest that the river goddess worship and what the ancients knew is also very similar or overlaps in concept of this tutelatory spirit idea.
Good. Like I like the fact that you're not calling them angels, because from what we've studied, what I know of them is it's an angelic language and it's a hierarchy of angels and I've even got books on the Enochian language and John Dee and stuff, but we don't know really what the spirits are. We just know, that's what he thought they were.
We just know it's in the books.
That's right.
We just know what we're told. So I'm going to suggest there's more to the story. I mean, the whole story everything about it is kind of like, and I say fishy with quotation marks, like, fishy, no matter how you look at it. And this is all of Rosicrucianism as well, is like, there's a lot of things that are a little bit unstable. And so supposedly John Dee's diaries were discovered, I think, sometime after his death. Mm-hmm. And he had them separated in two different boxes or lockers, buried and hidden maybe on his estate. I believe it was on his estate. Well, then how do we know there weren't three? Right? How do you know there aren't six? Like, you got that fishiness. And then how the story goes is those diaries ended up in the British Museum, and then I can't think of the name. It was the guy one of the founders of the Order of the Golden Dawn, had stumbled across the diaries, which had been sitting in the museum for a couple hundred years, and read them.
That would be either Samuel Mathers, Westcott, or I think his name was Robert Word or Flood. I forget which one it was.
I believe it was Mathers.
It was probably Mathers, yeah.
It was Mathers. So it's like, this is where we're told, like, where all of our information comes from. Mm-hmm. And so to me, that leaves a little bit of wiggle room. So what I'm suggesting right now, this is what I'm how I frame it up internally of what's happened. And then I'm going to show you the proof of why I think this is.
This is your hypothesis. Fantastic.
This is my hypothesis. Yeah, again, this is all Francis Bacon stuff. He taught you this is how to think in order to solve these mysteries. Come up with a hypothesis and then test it. And don't be tied to your hypothesis. And as better information comes along, you change your hypothesis. So that's the hypothesis. And so I'm going to go and say that if there are such things as tutelatory spirits, and they're tutelatory spirits that protect nations, they're like, it's a hierarchy, as you said before. Like, you could have your tutelatory spirit for your personal one, and then you got one that looks over the entire nation. So then why wouldn't there be one that looks over the entire earth?
Fair enough.
Right?
Right.
Fair enough. And based upon certainly, then, and the notion of tutelatory spirits, you're going to have some with forests, you're going to have some with trees, you're going to have some with mountains. Like, the earth is a living. The earth, we do not quite understand the full depth of what's going on with the earth. I'll leave it at that. And I'm open to it being a lot of things. And I look at the past and say, like, okay, what were they thinking? And it seems that river tutelatory spirits seem to be rather significant. And you know, just based upon how important river magic or worship was in the collective history. And I'm going to go a step further, and I'm going to say that the Susquehanna River was the tutelatory spirit of the planet. And that's why everything which I'm going to go and say has happened on the rivers happened. And that happened over a 400-year period. And I'm going to suggest that what happened was there was a 400-year magical working which was done on the tutelatory spirit in order to have the tutelatory spirit which oversees the planet to go in line with a particular agenda. That's the theory.
Okay.
And it's funny because I've said this to a lot of people, and sometimes there's this response. I can immediately see it on someone's face. There's a recoil. Like I'm saying, this is the best river. Like I'm saying this. The Eagles are the best football team. And like, I don't know, you know, the Steelers are kind of good, you know. I'm not talking about
right, because people are going to go, whoa, what about the Amazon or the Nile?
And
right?
Exactly. It's like, well, I don't really feel that. I'm not talking about feeling. I'm talking about let's go look at history and let's go look at the information. I'm not talking beauty. I'm not talking anything subjective. I'm talking about there's a place on your body which can influence the rest of your body. That doesn't mean that it's better than the other. You know, you go in certain glands have greater influence than your hand bone, but your hand bone's really important to life. You know, it's not a competition. It's understanding the structure or the foundation, or at least that's the way I'm looking at it. So that's the theory. So going back to river, the idea that it is a river goddess worship to the goddess Susquehanna, because Susquehanna is the name of it was the name of a key river back in the Celtic in the days of Gaul. It's now called the Seine. So the Seine used to be called the Susquehanna, and the Susquehanna. Obviously, you can hear some of these phonetics, and it was the John Smith map when that name was linked to the river. It had a lot of different names, and you know, there's some really interesting Gaelic links, but we're not going to. That's a path we're going to have to avoid for now. But the river is an altar. The entire river is an altar. And if you go back and you look at the Bible, and we see how the practice was done when they would build an altar, and an altar would be described as something which is of conspicuous location, meaning it's got to be obvious. It's got to be obviously significant. And then there at the altar, you would provide offerings. And what we know of are the most significant offerings are the firsts. You know, we've got human history is
yeah, I mean, that's a sad story, but it's true. Yeah.
And then it became the first fruits. It's like, you know, the first fruits of the harvest, the first is always significant.
Right.
And so the first is offered upon the altar to whoever the altar is before. That is
I was
logic.
thinking firstborns. I was thinking Old Testament.
Oh, you 100% right.
Yeah.
That's it. You know, this is all goes back to the same. This goes back to the same tradition, the same people. I mean, that's, you know, you follow
yeah,
the line.
I'm with you.
That's what's going on. And we're seeing it, though, in different expression. And so what we're seeing right here is at the three most conspicuous places upon the altar of the river. And so the river itself is the altar. So that stretches from the very beginning, the source locations, to the end. So the Susquehanna River, and if you could look at the images I sent you of the overall, is Y-shaped. Like there are two main branches, and then it goes down like a river, and then it opens up and becomes the Chesapeake Bay. We have this whole this is the entire body we're talking about. And there are probably 5 major undeniable geological significant places. We've got like the 2 source locations. We got the main confluence. Then we have the transition from river to estuary, to Chesapeake Bay. And then we have the transition from the bay into the ocean. And so we've already established, or I don't know if I said this outright, but Jamestown is located very, very, very close to the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay. And so what I'm going to suggest right there is where we have the first fruit of globalism. And I mean that like kind of in a general sense, in this idea of like this monochrome culture that we see spreading across the globe. You know, whether you want to look at that as like Walmart on every corner, like how Amazon is good. You know, that's what I mean. This like collectiveness, and then the government and UN and all the things that are becoming standardized. Like that's what I mean by the globalization. There's a standardization which is occurring. You know, and I'm going to say the first fruit of that was the birth of the British Empire, because no matter how you want to look at it, whether as an infrastructure, the United States and Britain have provided the main beginnings for, like, you know, what we're talking about, real world globalism, how it came into be. Like, yeah, it all came through these either companies from these countries, or just the fact that they're all English speaking, and English is the primary language for business across the globe. And
also keep in mind too, in Masonry, real quick, that if you read deep enough, their whole objective was to turn the United States into the new Jerusalem, the new Egypt, and to create a new world. That was their whole objective, right? Or that's what you hear about their objective being.
Yeah. Yes. So okay. So I want to go down that topic, but I know that I would have missed finishing the altar story. So we have at the first conspicuous location, we have the first fruit of globalism. This is where the British Empire and the United States began. So then we have the second transition. So that's at the where the Chesapeake Bay meets the Susquehanna River. And we find there, on a side note, is that there's a town called Havre de Grace, Maryland, and it's named after Le Havre, France, which was on the Seine River, right where the Seine River empties out into an estuary. So, I mean, there's so many different parallels between the Seine, Susquehanna, and the Susquehanna. But right by Havre de Grace, on the other side of, actually, no, it's on the same side of the river, is Aberdeen Proving Grounds. It's an army base. And at Aberdeen Proving Grounds is where the first electronic computer is found. And it was, and that first computer, it was built at Ben Franklin's University of Pennsylvania, and then it was delivered to Aberdeen Proving Grounds. And like that, this is a whole nother topic, but we're going to leave it right there. But the computer was called the Electronic Numerator, Integrator, and Arithmetic Computer, something like that. But it was always known as its acronym, or by its acronym. And its acronym was ENIAC, or Enoch.
Wow.
Okay. And so again, I'm not suggesting that was planned. I'm just saying, like, this is part of this undercurrent. And you see that throughout the entire computer industry, particularly with the first quantum computer is made by a manufacturer called D-Wave, like John D waving high, and like, oh, this is the first computer. It's John D's ENIAC. You know, he was a computer. His brain was wired like a computer. But the first fruit of the computer technology industry is located now in this river, and it's located at a key location. So now we go up a little bit further north. We pass over the sweet spot, the sacred spot, the 40th parallel, and then we go up to where, which is also where 3 Mile Island happened. It's where the Civil War, the Battle of Gettysburg would not have happened if it wasn't for the burning of the bridge at the Susquehanna, right at the 40th parallel. I mean, there's so much history happened there, and if you can read into that history, like there's an interesting story being told. But I'm going to go up to the confluence, which is the third major transition point, and where we see three rivers. It's a Y. We see the West Branch, the North Branch, and then what's called the Lower Susquehanna. They meet at a place called Sunbury, Pennsylvania. Sunbury, like, you bury the sun, eclipse, new moon, all that sort of stuff. But the first thing that happened there, the first fruit that occurred there, that is where Thomas Edison built his first power plant and building wired to receive electricity through three wires, through a positive, a negative, and a neutral. And so that is the third fruit, and it is of wired distribution of electricity.
All right,
and
so we're starting to see a lot of things becoming, a lot of technology, a lot of new things being birthed in this location.
So we're seeing three things. We're seeing three things very specifically. We're seeing globalism, we're seeing computer technology, and we're seeing the distribution of electricity. Gotcha. And so what I'm suggesting is these three were the first fruits offered on the altar in order to propagate across the planet, because it's the tutelatory spirit which rules the planet, and it's got to do the bidding of the forces that came in. So let's go and ground this out a little bit more. So the age of Aquarius. You're familiar with like different ages as it relates to like the age of Taurus. Okay. So the age of Aquarius, what the archetypes which are associated with the age of Aquarius, which we're said to be entering into. So the first thing is Aquarius is a very humanitarian sign or age, and it's very much about the group.
I'm really starting to understand what you're saying here.
All right.
Like if you think about it, we're starting to understand how spirits work and how they're influenced, how they're invoked into a certain specific location. And I've talked about this before, but go ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
So we have the first fruit of globalism lines up with the archetype of the group and humanitarianism. Globalism, I would say, is one expression of it, but it is certainly an expression which falls underneath that archetype. So now we move on to the other archetypes associated with the age of Aquarius. The next one is innovation. And so now we go and we look and we think of like, well, innovation can happen in all sorts of different ways, but probably when we think of innovation right now, primarily of its influence on the planet, it's computer technology, the second first fruit which was offered. And then we also know that the age of Aquarius, or Aquarius, is ruled by the planet Uranus. These archetypes between the signs and the ruling planets are very similar. And Uranus is always thought of as the symbol of electricity. It's very electric. And so now we have the third. And we see, and it's particularly interesting for the wired for two different ways, excuse me. The first one is how the three wires can be thought of as symbols of like the left-hand path, the right-hand path, and the middle path. You've got like the positive, the negative, the neutral. And then we also have it located where the three rivers come together. That's where Sunbury is. So it's like it's a lot of as above, below symbology, which is happening there. But then the second thing is, if you know your electricity history, supposedly the gentleman by the name of Nikola Tesla had or was working on or had demonstrated how electricity could be delivered wirelessly. Like the need for wires is not a necessity.
Yeah, and this is something that we're just coming into. We think we've figured it all out, but I think we're just now starting to understand wireless.
Yes. So we see what's being offered. We see what's being offered is 3 different expressions of the archetypes of the age of Aquarius. And the 400 years from 1607 to 2007, it also lines up very, very closely with with the year 2000, which in a very, very general sense was, ages are what? They're supposed to be 21, 2,100, and it's been a while.
Yugas.
58. 58. That's like the for the precession of the equinoxes. That's what each of these ages are. And then there are all these different other systems which talk about ages, whether it's the Yuga system, whether it's the Mayan calendar. But we see that there seems to be a lining up. There was all that talk like around 2012, what was happening, and this is like we're making the shift. And 2012, no matter. Regardless if you think that was all just like, a ploy, or maybe it was just like hype or nothing happened, I don't know. But collective consciously wise, there was like a lot of influence, or there was a lot of energy going on to the date 2012, December 21st, 2012. And we go and we look at the, and this court lines up like the end of this cycle of that Mayan calendar was lining up, generally speaking, with this coming of the age of Aquarius. And like all of these things are kind of generally lining up. And then when we go and we use 2012, the 2012 date as the end point, and we look at, the word is escaping me. It is the unit 1 smaller, Buktan, but it's something like that. There are 13 of them in the Mayan calendar, which make up the cycle which ended on December 21st. And each one of those is 394 years. And so when you line that up with the 400 years of the ritual, you see that there is a pretty tight, it was like 95% overlap in terms of like the time frame of the final phase of the Mayan calendar, the final 394 years, the 13th. Gosh, I can't think of it. Begins with, it's got a B, T, and a K in it. I can't think of the vowels.
That's all right.
But it lines up with that calendar wise. And then we also see, so we have that which is kind of happening. And then we also see at each of the endpoints of this altar, at the source location of the West Branch, at the source location of the North Branch, and at the transition from bay into ocean, there are 3 national secular holidays that occur, and they all fall on traditional holy days, and that would be Buktans, yes. Baktuns. That's what they're called. So the holy days being the midpoints between equinox and solstice. So there are 8 points on the calendar, 8 holy days. The two equinoxes, the 2 solstices, and the 4 midpoints. And so we find at the West Branch that on February 2nd, which is, what is that, Candlemas, is also where we find the National Groundhog's Day celebration. That's where it happens. Puxatawny Phil, if you're familiar with that, if you ever see. Okay, so we have that there. So then we go up to the North Branch. And so the North Branch is located about 150 feet from the Baseball Hall of Fame. That's where it begins. Like the source of the river begins right at the Baseball Hall of Fame. And that is a whole nother like fascinating story, all like deep in with Helena Blavatsky and theosophy. But from the most basic level, we're going to go and look, and the highlight of the year for the Baseball Hall of Fame is when they do their induction weekend. And that's when they issue in the whatever that year's inductees into the Hall of Fame. It's a big celebration for baseball fans. They come around, and this happens usually either the last weekend or of July or the first weekend of August. Obviously, this is about a celebration for people to come. So it's always going to be around the weekend, but it falls very, very, very close to August 2nd. And so August 2nd is, what's the holiday? That's Lammas. Lammas falls on August 2nd. It's the midpoint between the summer solstice and the fall equinox. And then we have down at the mouth of the Chesapeake, which is also the headquarters of NATO. And the U.S. headquarters of NATO, its primary headquarters are in Brussels, I believe. But the U.S. headquarters are right in Norfolk, Virginia, and they have their NATO celebration. And NATO, again, we can go deep down on NATO, but that happens on the weekend, which is very close to May 1st, or May Day, which is the midpoint between the spring equinox and the summer solstice. So we have all of these secular celebrations, constantly fueling this river with energy on the key dates. My guess is if I were a betting man, I'd be like, yeah, there's a whole lot of esoteric stuff going on as well. But this is feeding this kind of ritual, or this 400-year altar, which was meant to bring in a very certain expression of the age of Aquarius to occur. And what we're seeing it is the age of Aquarius being expressed through globalism, through computer technology and wired distribution of electricity. And then you go and you look at what's happening, what we are literally in these stages. And I would say this also all ties into what technologists refer to as the technological singularity. This is all kind of driving to a certain, transition, certain sort of change in how life is experienced in a very, very major way. And it is from this river, which is where the grounding, the operation was done in order to come into material reality the way it has.
Wow.
And there've always been, quote unquote, people who are directing reality for the majority of people by working on the meta level. And that's what I suggest we're seeing here. And we're seeing it on a magical level.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and they've done this in everything. I mean, if you look at a lot of the monuments, even the Pentagon, why would you, if you look at that, and I'm just putting this into reference, if you look at that and you resurrected, or you, I guess, erected a building that has to do with war, wouldn't you use ancient symbolism that has to do with war to glorify that spirit? And that's exactly what a Pentagon is, right? That's the symbol of war. It's the symbol of severity on the tree of life. Everything in Masonry has to do with the Kabbalah. And Blue Lodge Masons have no idea why they're doing those rituals and those stances and movements they're doing. But it all has to do with the Kabbalah, the tree of life, and its astrological and planetary correspondences, and way more stuff. So everything of what you're saying is making sense.
So then once you kind of have that, all of that, I think is context. And the context is okay, that's interesting. And, what's next sort of thing. We've been conditioned nowadays, we're always looking for what's the next neat thing for me to go and fill my brain with. The purpose, at least for me, is, I think it's very clear that we are in this time of change. That's very evident. You just look around, and in the most literal sense, the human being, the physical human being, you and your skin, me and my skin, this is a different mechanism than your great grandparents. It's literally changed. That's an objective fact. We're almost on 4 generations of DNA altering vaccines. We've changed on that level. As we began eating genetically modified food, we're changing as the electromagnetic waves of everything which we're in, it's affecting us. It may be happening slowly, or it may not be like incredibly obvious, like we're growing three heads, but we're undoubtedly changing. And it seems slow because we're living in our bodies. It seems slow to us in our time frame. But as we see this change, we can see the changes happening everywhere in terms of like, how we're living and the environment is changing and what's being added to it, geoengineering, all that sort of stuff. It's all happening. Sure. There's also being like, as we talked about in the very beginning, and we're like, and you said, well, they put that code in there in the map to be discovered.
That's right. And
so the question, or at least how my mind works and what I'm interested in, is like, well, why would they want to tell us this? And why are we discovering this now? And like, why is this significant? Because timing is very important. Timing is very important. And so timing is happening now. Like we're at an interesting point right now with technology, and we're at a real interesting point is right before the next big change or a big step in technology is going to happen once 5G becomes operational, because the Internet of Things will become a reality. And so that is going to change everything in ways we can't imagine. So, but we're still in a place where we can become aware of what's happening and aware of the mechanisms of this environment. And what I'm getting at is like, okay, there's something, and this is the most obvious truth, is like there's something very grounding about the ground and about the rivers and about like the environment which the secondary environment is being built upon. And so part of, we have free will to do whatever we wish. And, we could go and get swept along as there's a certain direction which things are going. And then there also seems to be an opening of the codes of maybe how to navigate this particular time. Because I think this time was designed. This time was designed to go and life on Earth to match what's going on in the heavens. And then when these changes happen, there's also times for great change. And what these clues are, what all of this is pointing to, and I certainly don't have the answers, but there's an unveiling of how to navigate in a very, very real and material way of like, during this time.
So you don't look at all this as a grand evil conspiracy, right? That's what I'm getting from you. Like, do you look at this as a grand evil conspiracy, or do you look at it as a way, just a way of learning quality, esoteric, hidden information?
So I would say,
that's what's on people's mind right now, I promise you.
Right. So it's all of that. So there are, I think that some of this is very, very conscious and planned by human beings, and some of it, like in the same way, like that I got swept up in this and this brought me to where I am based upon a whole bunch of different decision makings. This brought me here. So I think a lot of this stuff is done that way. I don't think that there's any sort of like conscious, like acting on a plan. Like I don't necessarily think that, but I do think that it's very well established that there have always been people who dictate reality. Whether we want to call that a Benjamin Franklin or a Francis Bacon or an Alan Greenspan, or like however you want to look at this, whether mythologically or metaphorically or literally, or like, no, the people who control the rules are controlling reality. Like that's a truth. And yeah, there's a bunch of stuff that happens which most people don't know about, and everyone can agree like very easily that media and information is and probably has always been very manipulated to form certain opinions to get people to behave in a certain way. So there is a conspiratorial level. I do think that part of it is rather destructive, and I think it's always been destructive. And that's part of it. And so that's why I kind of like tiptoe around the evil aspect. There's like destructive, nasty stuff, which I don't want to be part of. And there's like, but that is part of an even larger story.
Yeah, it is. And I get what you're saying. Because for a minute there, I thought, when I was commenting on some of the contextual stuff I knew about that made sense to what you're saying, I started getting that feeling like maybe you thought I'm missing the whole point of what you're saying here. But I don't think I am. I'm just fascinated that you found all of these correspondences to this one location, which is kind of funny because 400 is what? It's perfection, right? So, yeah, that's very fascinating, man. So where are you at now?
Well, let me throw this one piece out. So, we'll go back to the Jamestown celebration, the 400 celebration, and that was in Virginia. And if you go and this is kind of dark, and if we want to say evil, this would be under the evil category. 2 weeks, I think it was 2 weeks before the Jamestown celebration is when the Virginia Tech massacre occurred. Queen Elizabeth was there for that. They're children, they're symbols of children. And it does fit a modus operandi. Going back to the very beginning, as you said.
Right.
The biggest industry on this planet is the arms industry. We have our entire culture, the biggest industry, because money rules our culture. Our biggest industry, the most amount of sales, total sales, has to do with killing each other. That is the nature. That doesn't mean that everyone's bad, and that doesn't mean that this is not an environment for us to grow and all that sort of stuff. But let's be honest here.
Yeah, and when you look at this Bacon mystery, right, and John Dee and everything they were tapped into, and Manly P. Hall, who talks about the divine seals of revelation, the way he talked about it was that there are 7 different meanings to all of the stuff in the Bible. So we're talking about some deep, deep stuff that's hidden in here. I mean, that's some deep stuff, right? And you're on a path right now, I think, to where you're just finding every little aspect of this location. You know what it makes me think about, and I could be wrong here, but because you brought up the altar, you brought up, all these different locations, all these different correspondences to these monuments and this location at the Susquehanna River. It makes me think about when people talk about portals, right? And in your mind, you think, well, a portal is just like this. You think in animated ways, like we're supposed to see something open up with our own eyes or whatever. But the spirit world doesn't work like that, I don't think. And I think when they do certain things like this, and this is just my hypothesis, is that that's exactly what they're doing. They're opening up an energy or exalting something that they already know. Based on location, monuments, and numbers, and all that stuff.
So I agree completely with that. Do you know the author? His name is Donald Tyson. He's an esoteric. He's an occult scholar. He's written a lot of
Donald
books.
Tyson, yeah.
Okay, so he wrote a book. Or he wrote an essay in 1996, and it's called The Enochian Apocalypse. And he puts out an idea that he thinks that John Dee opened up something which he didn't realize he was opening up, and that at that moment, like what was speaking to, I guess, Edward Kelly. That's when they let it in, like it was kind of like in through the back door, and what Dee didn't realize what was happening, and then from that idea, Tyson suggests that these energies, these entities, whatever you want to call it, once they came in through this portal, they opened up this portal which got them in to this particular reality. They began to influence people more or less from the subconscious level, because they're non-physical entities. They're going to work on a non-physical level, and primarily, like, that would be the subconscious, which
right.
And so it's this idea that this is leading to, that all of that has led up to, or is leading up to, what we would call the apocalypse, which one of the definitions is, it's the time of the revealing, the revelation between the end of one age and the beginning of another age, as one age goes and must collapse so the new one can be built. And this is happening and being dictated, like you were saying, from maybe a couple hierarchies up.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all kind of influenced by it and part of it, and are living through it. And so that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a scholar of Manly P. Hall, and you read his What the Ancient Wisdom Expects from His Disciples, which we brought that up a few times here on the show, he plainly states, he gives away the symbolism of the human body and some of the Bible stories and some of our, I guess you could say, our nursery rhymes like that we have here, all that correspond to the human body and what these things mean. But he also says that the mystery schools are not exoteric, so that all of these like monuments, towers, and buildings that we see are just, he says it plainly in there. He says they're just exoteric symbols for esoteric powers, and that the true mystery schools are in the internal realms that are being led by these hidden masters, or what you want to say, or beings that manipulate the destiny of man as we speak right now.
Yeah.
That's pretty trippy, right? It's a scary thought. But at the same time, when somebody like you starts discovering all this stuff, then you become empowered, right? Because you start to get in the know. You start to understand what's going on. You really start to understand metaphysical things instead of just only understanding what the word metaphysical means.
It certainly changes, and that, for me personally, so it's like, the information is information, and then what someone wants to do with information is unique to each person. And my personal interest is very similar to what you were saying in the beginning. Like, it's all in the body, and the body it's our personal universe. It's our personal microcosm. Like, you can't control anything outside your body. All you can control is inside. And there's a way that it links up with what it's in, what our environment, I keep calling it the environment. I'm talking about like earth and the air, like, where we're living. And it's during this time that, particularly as the physical body is changing, that's what the whole GMO stuff was about. And it's becoming, it's integrating with technology. I mean, that's literally what's happening. There's no way you can say that's not happening in culture right now. But I also think there's this opportunity to really understand the body and being able to be physical in this realm which we live in. And I'm not certain exactly what they are, but Manly P. Hall definitely hints to, like, no, that is reality. That is a real reality. This is what is this potential is possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you were bringing up the ages earlier. I used to get some emails from a Rosicrucian society, and at the bottom they would say in Latin, under the sign of the bull and exalt Yeshua. So it's basically like under the sign of Taurus and praise be to Jesus. That's kind of weird. You don't see stuff like that unless you read a Rosicrucian email, but you get it, right? You get you understand what I just said, though. You see what I mean? So,
Yes.
So where is this? Where are you at now with this? I mean, you've got tons and tons of documents here on the website that just, all of this stuff adds up to perfection of what you're studying here. Like, it just does. There's no doubting it anymore. This isn't a grand conspiracy. I don't care if people think it is. To me, this is not a grand conspiracy. It's not somebody putting a whole bunch of circumstantial facts together. You've really done your work here, man.
I appreciate you saying that. So again, we talked a little bit about astrology, and my own personal astrology is my calling card to how I fit into all this. And you know, I'm your typical Venus and Capricorn. Like, I want to make it real, and I love the material aspect of it. So I've written guidebooks for this area. Like, these are the places to go to. This is what you want to look for physically. This is what it represents energetically or spiritually, and this is how you can use it in like real life. So I'm talking about that. I go and I give presentations, but it's an awareness, but it's not even so much about this area, which I do think is significant. I mean, in my opinion, like, this location is within 3 hours, within a 3-hour car drive of the largest population center on planet Earth. So that would be from Boston down to Washington, D.C. This location's like, I don't know, like 90 minutes north of Baltimore, 90 minutes west of Philadelphia. Like, it's easy to get to. And so I want to help provide an infrastructure for it to be actually experienced, because it's being opened up, the mystery. But then also, like, I'm very, very interested personally in really working on the physical body and blending the different sorts of energy techniques, which we know, like Qigong, and like really ultimately coming down to like conscious body movement, not doing a program, but really understanding the physical body, because it's, as you said, it's the physical body which is what matters. That's what we're in. This is where you're experiencing your consciousness. This is where I'm experiencing my consciousness, and this is the setting which my body's in. And so as it's changing, there's a responsibility to better understand how to manage that physical body, as quite literally everything is changing around us.
There you go. See, you're the only person I've talked to besides one other person that agrees. You can say it if you want. People aren't going to think you're evil. You're interested in real alchemy. Okay? And you're interested in the real alchemical transmutation of your energetic body. And that is what Hermetic alchemy truly is. It's not, I mean, what people think it is they think it's Carl Jung. Well, Carl Jung only talked about the mental aspects of alchemy. True Hermetic alchemy is energetic transmutation by understanding the energies of the human body and the energies that it corresponds to. That's what I was told by a very, like, way up there Rosicrucian who didn't really go much into it, but that's what he told me. And you're tapping into that.
And I think it's a practical, like, it's a necessary practice. I think that's the necessary practice, particularly during this time. Like, that's part of what's going on. Like, that's like, how do I?
This is like, so it's like the alchemical transmutation of humanity too, at the same time.
Yes.
Of our bodies.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And so, like, that's the stuff I like that's the stuff which I'm interested on a personal level, like, in talking about and sharing with people, and, like, you know, and being able to link in and integrate all of these different parts for this transmutation, for whatever that actually looks like from an experiential level, in a way which would be as profound as the changes which we're seeing in our environment right now. Everything is changing profoundly, so we should be also. this is the time which that can happen. Like there's a window is opening up, maybe that's a way of thinking about it. It's like, and I think I'm not the only one who's saying that. We're all sensing this in different ways. I just tell this story is my understanding and my piece of the puzzle, which I'm adding to it.
Right. Well, I know that our government, everything that the United States runs on, if you looked into masonry enough, you'll see that this whole country's government was built on what the Freemasons do, right? Mm-hmm. They have the whole government inside of Freemasonry. And Benjamin Franklin went to France as a Freemason to speak to his Freemasonic brothers to get help, because they wanted to make this the New Jerusalem and the New Egypt, right? And so there was a Masonic meeting in secret to influence the war, our Revolutionary War, so that we could have this place. Now, what I'm thinking is what you might have uncovered is once we won this war, or once we started understanding that this was going to be the new home, they had to find a cornerstone to build the temple of the United States on. And I'm wondering if this is the cornerstone. Because every building has a cornerstone. Everything that they build, everything they erect has to have a cornerstone at first. That's another way of looking at it, right? That's just another way of looking at it.
No. I think that that dovetails perfectly. So if you saw the visual I sent of the map with the 3 different colleges, and like there's the fourth point is hidden. Yeah. Like there's nothing there. It's cornfields. Like when I say hidden, like, it's hidden from sight. Like, what is this invisible college which is being built upon this thing? Like, what makes this location so significant? And how I think about that is very similar to what you just described.
Right.
In terms of the cornerstone, and particularly that missing cornerstone. But on a more practical level, I mean, DC is built upon the Potomac, and the Potomac is a tributary of the Susquehanna. It's on the Chesapeake Bay, and the town which is located on the Susquehanna, right at the 40th parallel, is called Columbia, Pennsylvania. It was called Columbia, Pennsylvania because it was on the short list of potential locations for where the nation's capital was going to be built, where the District of Columbia finally was built. Columbia is the name of the goddess, the Liberty goddess, which was the looked after the founding fathers.
Fascinating.
And so it's a fascinating. There's fascinating information.
Now, do you still find, the more you dig into this, even now, are you still finding more and more stuff, like more information, more correspondences, more, just more information? Are you still digging stuff out of this, or do you think you've got it capped?
I have more or less stopped researching it, but I'm always aware. I'm always aware. If something new were to show up, and I'm always open to seeing something new if it were to show up. But, it kind of gets to a point where you're like, all right, enough is enough. Like, what's the next step?
Mm-hmm.
Or at least that's the way how I approach it.
Well, you have to, I think the next step is where a lot of people do, what they don't want to take, right? And a lot of people don't want to take that next step into learning more about this stuff because, honestly, most of this community has been taught that these things are evil, that they're just evil. But you have to understand, like, Mars is Mars, right? That's it. Uranus is Uranus. These things do what they're supposed to do.
Exactly.
And a sword is a sword. You can use it to protect or you can use it to murder. What are you going to do with this information? Are you going to stop looking because you're afraid? That's what I ask myself those questions.
I mean, I keep going back to, like, I want to apply it. I want to live it.
Yeah, for sure. I totally get what you're saying. Yeah.
That's my hot button is making it, not just keeping it as an abstract, like, oh, this is interesting mental stuff. It's like, no, this is meant to be, how could this be applied? How can this understanding reality, seeing proof of some of the ways which the hidden realms of reality works, like, how would you use that in a practical way based upon this very, very interesting time which we are living?
And another fact that you brought up earlier kind of goes along with my studies about the Golden Dawn. There were a lot of prominent names in the Golden Dawn, William Butler Yeats, Dion Fortune, Samuel Mathers, Israel Regardie. I mean, there was a ton of really big names. Other people that didn't want people to know, I believe, were in there, like C.S. Lewis. There were a lot of Christians in the Golden Dawn, Paul Foster Case. But once they got into the Enochian language, that's when the order had disagreements. Like Paul Foster Case split off because he thought, he stuck with the tarot and the Kabbalah, and he said, this Enochian stuff, these guys don't know what they're getting into. They're unleashing evil things that they're not supposed to. And there were a lot of things like that split up the original Golden Dawn order, but that was one of the main things that they toiled over, was should they be doing rituals and looking into the Enochian language and summoning these spirits. That was one of the biggest things that broke them up.
Yeah. That's an interesting point.
Yeah. And most of the magical stuff that we have today, like even when you look in Wicca and all this stuff, they all get it from the Golden Dawn. They've just turned it into something else. The watchtowers, that all goes back to John Dee. All that stuff. Yeah.
Yes, it does.
I'm super impressed with this, man. If I ever come up there, you'll have to take me on a tour. Do you take people on tours and stuff?
Yeah, definitely. I love to do this. I mean, I live here, and I like to show this area to people who are new. I mean, that's something I definitely enjoy doing.
Now, one question I wanted to ask you was about the Susquehanna, like the Indians, right? There's got to be more to that. Other than the apron and the giant thing, do you think that they, by your studies, do you think that perhaps maybe they corresponded and talked and worked with each other, like, the colonists and the Indians? Or do you think that we just pulled some symbolism from them?
I think they were very significant people. Yes, I do. And I'm open to the idea of, so they were, the Susquehannocks. So the north, what we now think of as the northeast of the United States, like it's not commonly thought of as like, when people go into their memory banks and they think of Indians in the United States, there's usually like maybe like a Southwest image, like you're picturing that environment, like maybe which came from Hollywood images or just like when photography occurred or was introduced, it was already when all of the people who were living on the East Coast were no longer living there. They were either pushed west or they were eradicated. The Susquehannocks were eradicated. But that being said, the Northeast was like, this was the place, like New York and Pennsylvania and Maryland, Virginia, like this was heavily populated. And of all of the different tribes, the Susquehannocks were the most dominating. Like they were the baddest guys in town.
Really?
And
okay.
Yeah.
So we probably did have to work with them, politically.
Oh, definitely. There's a book which I have, which is fascinating. It's called, let me see. I think I have it right here. It's called The Annals of the Susquehannocks and Other Indian Tribes of Pennsylvania, 1500s through 1763. And it is just a a collection of every piece of information written about the Susquehannocks and other Indian tribes of Pennsylvania in that 260-year period. Like some are from newspaper articles and some whatever is known. And you begin to read this and you see, or at least for me, it really changed my understanding of looking at this area in terms of what it was like before it was colonized. And then particularly in those early days and like how those relationships were. And undoubtedly the Susquehannocks they did a lot of trade with the Swedes and with the English and the French, and they were very connected.
All right. So in your text here, you said the Susquehanna River is being used as a large-scale altar to the Druidic river goddess Susquehanna, right? Did I say that right?
Mm-hmm.
But by conducting secular festivals on sacred days at the endpoints and introducing Aquarian concepts at key geological transitions. Now, another thing that you brought up, I'm sorry, but I'm analyzing this to death now too. Another thing that you brought up was the fact that it brought on a certain age, that this was one of the most important, if not the most important rivers on the planet when it comes to this, as far as the correspondences of water and what the age it's bringing on anyways. So if you look at the correspondences of Aquarius, which I'm sure you have, and you know that Francis Bacon, if you really believe, was there to translate the New Testament, the astrological plant and herb of wormwood corresponds with that. Now, what does the Bible say wormwood is? Wormwood is pretty much globalization. It's part of the apocalypse.
Mm-hmm.
The star. I mean, if you look at what Michael's talking about here, and you look up the archangels, go to archangels-and-angels.com and look up the astrological correspondences of Aquarius, you can see the apocalypse unfolding in the story that you're talking about right now.
Yeah.
That's some trippy stuff, man.
So you know what gets this is what I think is the real trippy stuff. This is one level more detailed, but I made a whole bunch of videos which goes through and explains all this. So I did this one series called Mystic Lancaster, and I find it fascinating. I don't know how many other people have seen it because it's so detailed, but it goes in. I build up a story of how Lancaster City was laid out by Rosicrucian James Hamilton and all this sort of stuff, and they did. There was a magical ritual there, which was known as the Lancaster Treaty of 1744, and then from there, which is the center of Lancaster City, 3 roads eventually go from that location and meet the river. And I go into the symbolism beneath each one of these roads, and it's pretty interesting. But then the third road is just fascinating. That third road, which hits it dies into the river right where the 40th parallel is. So 40 degrees, 0 minutes, 0 seconds, like as literal as you can, on the other side of the river from where High Point is. So High Point is on the western side, that's York County, and then on the east side is Lancaster County. They're known as the White Rose and the Red Rose cities. And so the road that goes and dies in at the 40th parallel is Route 999.
You got to be kidding me.
And it dies in to a road which is called Route 144 or 441, which is 144 backwards. So, the 144,000 is a significant number within, if we're going to talk about the book of Revelations. Mm-hmm. And when you add, we have Route, we've got 3 nines, right? The end of 3 cycles or like one really big cycle, however you want to go look at it. And it dies into 441. You add those 2 numbers together and it gets you 144 or 1,440. And you have all of the, like everything is pointing like in this kind of incredibly synchronized way at exactly this location.
Yeah, check this out, too. And a third angel sounded, and there fell a great star. Well, what is the tarot card for that corresponds with this is the star, right?
Okay.
And there fell a great star from heaven, burning as if it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers, and upon a fountain of waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood, which is another correspondence to Aquarius, right? And the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. Hello. Yeah, like that's pretty trippy. So they're either like exalting that fact right there where this location is, or that's this location, you know.
And I wonder, like, you know, chicken and egg sort of thing, you know, which comes first,
right?
Like, you know, I don't know, but that's what certainly seems to be occurring.
Yeah, and everybody wonders about the Book of Revelation too, right? They say it was John of Patmos, but if you really think about it, if you look into history, we got no proof that guy wrote the Book of Revelations. But it could have been Francis Bacon, and we don't know who Francis Bacon was. So, theoretically, just a theory, Shakespeare himself, if you believe Francis Bacon was Shakespeare, could have wrote Revelations and filled it full of symbolism for the occultist to figure out what this stuff really means. I believe that actually the more I look into it, the more Kabbalistic stuff I see in the New Testament, the more stuff on astrological stuff in the New Testament, I really think that Bacon mystery, there's something to it.
I tend to agree.
Yeah, you seem awful quiet. I feel like I've said something wrong, or am I just agreeing with you too much?
No, I totally agree. I think I just got I got hit with the 2:47 a.m. wave.
Oh yeah, I got you. It's late night. Yeah, welcome to the late night. Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is your crowd, man. The late night people mainly. That like this is the people that they think about this stuff. Like this is your people. And I know I've got listeners from where you live, and I know I've got at least 4 or 5 people I know from up there. They need to come hit you up, man. You guys could go out and look at the stuff or something.
Definitely so. If you go to Instagram, that's probably the where I put the most amount of material, but you could contact me there. You could always contact through the website or through Facebook or something like that. But I love giving tours. You could get the guidebook from the website. And so any sort of interaction with people who this resonates with. And it's interesting. I've probably presented this material in person, different parts of it, maybe 100 times. And it's consistent that people come up to me afterwards, like, maybe 1 or 2 people, and they have this look in their eye. And it's usually just in the local area that I present. And something which I've said had, like, something within the information which was shared made a connection within their own story where they're like, okay, now it makes sense. And so my guess is if listening to this, and if you're in the area, and you've ever wondered why, investigate. Follow some of the videos I made, and go there and put your feet on the ground and be open, because there seems to be something a large synchronizer, if you will, occurs when people put their consciousness to this.
Yeah, because that's all I'm doing now, is just picking apart every little thing. And I'm sure you get emails from people all the time saying, look, I found, what is this? What does this mean? Once they really start looking into that, don't you? I bet you get that stuff all the time.
I get that, yes.
Yeah. So I'm probably going to do that too, just to be honest with you.
Feel free to. Please do.
But I mean, there's just too many. I mean, come on, guys. There's just too many correspondences here. If you look at Aquarius, and what he's talking about, and the star and the river, and that's just what I'm looking at. The OTO talks about they worship the god of Nuit. That's a correspondence to it. Athena, Juno. There's just so much stuff here, man, that I think is very fascinating and interesting. I'd love to have you back on the program and talk about this some more later on, you know? I really would. And I hate that we got a late start. I really do.
Well, how about we do this? Let the, go and let this
Let it
sink in and see where it takes you.
Yeah.
I know where it took me. I'm curious where it takes other people. And let's talk again. We could talk about. There are plenty of other things which we could talk about. I would recommend, particularly if this is speaking to you, watch some of the videos. Go to YouTube. Watch the Mystic Lancaster ones. We didn't even talk about the petroglyphs. We didn't talk about the rock carvings. We didn't even talk about how TMI. 3 Mile Island and its connection with Tiamat.
Oh, wow. Okay. Gotcha.
And then how that ties into the ritual of the burning of Notre Dame, which was, a symbol of Isis. There's a lot, if you like the details and you want to get into it, and this is scratching your itch, I'd love to talk about it some more.
Yeah. And, I noticed on here that it says on your website, you've got, at the bottom here, it says in-depth audio and video. Do you have that on your website too? The audio part?
That's it. I think there might be the audio would be just podcast interviews. I think I have some of those on there. Admittedly, the website it's information overload, and it can be hard for some people to navigate. It was kind of designed that way. It requires just diving in, and you just start swimming around until it starts to make sense. And there's a lot of just visual JPEG imagery, but there's also videos as well. And so, explore that.
Tell me about this starboard astrology that you do.
All right. So astrology. So what I do is, and this is true for all of us, is I have an approach. There's a way which I approach, let's say, information. And what you have witnessed in this conversation is just an example of my approach, the way I look at things and identify patterns and see certain things which are obvious once it's pointed out, but until it's obvious, it's not. I bring that to astrology. And I built, as I said before, I'm also a visual artist, and I built a replica of the zodiac, and it's these two different wheels, and there's stones, and I more or less, what a starboard session is I build someone's chart, and I tell the chart as I build it. And so two things happen. There's the, just the intellectual thing, which is kind of fun, to hear someone explain your chart. And I show it in a way that it goes from just being an abstract to okay, your Mars is located here and this is located here, and we can begin to see it. But it's also an energy surrogate, because there's not a better symbol of an individual than their time date stamp of the heavens, or the placement of their natal chart, the placement of the planets at the time of their first breath. And so when we go and build it, and we build it on this it's a magical board. There's no way around it. What went into building it, it's everything is in the phi ratio, the materials I use, volcanic ash, and the symbols. This is a magical tool. And so when a chart is built, or when someone's natal chart is built upon there, we build this linkage. So it's also this deep energy sort of thing, which leads to integration and, all of the different things which can happen on the energetic level. And so how I do that is I record, it's it's not a dynamic experience. I will I've got a camera which is on a tripod above my table, and I record it with the camera pointing down on the board, looking at my hands, and I speak to you as if you were there for 2 hours. And I make a video, and then I upload it to Dropbox, and then when it's ready, I send you the code, and then you download that and a bunch of other like visual files, which are complimentary, so you can watch it at your own leisure, at your leisure, and you can watch it as many times as you like.
Yeah, you start out like you got this. I like how you got it set up, because you start out with like the mystery envelope and explaining everything, and then if people are interested, then they can go into the starboard astrology and really look at that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
I think you've tapped into something fantastic here, man. Like true alchemy. You know, a lot of people think they know what alchemy means. We've been hearing this Jung stuff forever. Because he picked apart the symbols very well, but I've never really truly believed that Jung knew the mysteries of alchemy. I always kind of knew it was an energetic transformation.
Well, I don't know if I know the mysteries of alchemy, but this is certainly how I like to do it.
You're tapping into it. That's all I'm saying.
Yes, I appreciate that. I appreciate that that observation.
Yeah, I don't either. Hell, I'm just some old podunk hillbilly from Arkansas, but I've tapped into a lot of things. I mean, if we are truly built in God's image, as the texts say, then innately we're all capable of tapping into these things, I think.
This is my personal opinion. My personal opinion is that's what Rosicrucianism is actually about. Like everything about Rosicrucianism is kind of like mysterious and murky, but the truth of it, the true Rosicrucians are people like yourself, like people who do it in an authentic way to you. You know, I do it in an authentic way to me, and I don't know what Rosicrucian is, but I think that's who the Rosicrucians are.
Yeah. It's spirit into matter and energy into matter. It's the phi ratio, the portal, all that stuff. This has been fascinating, and I hate that we got to get out of here, but I'm sure it's late. Is this the latest program you ever did, by the way?
This is officially the latest program I've ever done.
Welcome to the late night, brother. Yeah, it's fun here.
I appreciate you initiating me into it.
Yeah, and you guys go check out the website, SusquehannaAlchemy.com. I will put all the links in the show notes and stuff, too, for you podcast listeners. And thank you again for coming on the program. It's been a blast.
Thanks, Joe. I had a great time myself.
We got to get out of here tomorrow night. Yes, I'm going to be talking about Bigfoot. Just keep an eye out for the flyers. And don't forget that this show was produced by the Fringe FM. His co-producer is Patrick, a.k.a. Pacho, as well as Don. Another co-producer is Dennis. And music was by Chronox. We didn't really play a lot of breaks at all, so it's just Chronox. But I did that because I was late, so I made it up to you. There you go. We'll see you tomorrow night. Stay tuned for the Secret Teachings. Good night.
Yes.